Our next discussion is Art Talk New York Stories.
So we are honored to introduce legendary artists Risk, Al Diaz, aka Samo, and Gatsby as they share their New York stories with us. From the street to the studio, catch a glimpse into the whole graffiti street and urban art movements and more.
Welcome, Risk. Welcome, Al. Hi, Gatsby.
Hello.
Make sure you've taken me off mute. I think you
I
have.
think we're all good.
I think, yeah. So I didn't dress in white, but.
That's okay,
That's okay.
Al. That's okay. Al, thanks for joining us. I know you're in the middle of a show tonight, so we appreciate you taking time out to have a quick discussion with us for the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to kick it off. When we think about the origins of the graffiti art and street art movements, we think of artists like Risk and Al Diaz and Basquiat and others. But there is a difference between street art and graffiti art. Graffiti art was a young subculture, and Al and I were just discussing this the other day. Graffiti came about as a language on the walls of the street, and street art is more conceptual and is sometimes commissioned. Like if you think about the Wynwood walls in Miami, I mean, which is a major attraction every time we go down to do our shows. Thousands and thousands of people are going to Wynwood to see the walls, but there is a difference between them. Al, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, street art. I mean, one of the problems in telling that story is that it's become one kind of a big soup. You know, people throw the term and the actual work that street art, that work that represents, which is, you know, sometimes more academic, sometimes more illustration or image oriented, as opposed to graffiti culture, which is, you know, from my generation, which is the first generation of, you know, street and subway art. Well, graffiti was more of a sport to us, and it was about the name and the number and spreading our names and our identity, as opposed to decorating anything, really, you know. So it was definitely more of a pissing contest in a sense, where it's, you know, it's ego motivated, and it's about getting your identity out there and recognized. And that's really the essence of the first string of graffiti artists. We were not, you know, a little later it would develop into a more refined way of presenting your name, but it started out, you know, fairly crudely, because you're talking about a very young culture. You know, the average, I mean, like Risk knows from being part of Beyond the Streets that when you would enter the one of the first things you saw was a John Narr photograph of the first string of graffiti artists at a subway station on 145th Street, and there's not a mustache in the bunch. The kids are like from 9 to 14, and that was the average. I mean, I personally started writing when I was 12, and, you know, the older guys were, you know, 14. You know, that was the older guys. So, and I think it's actually historically documented that graffiti is probably the youngest art movement ever created, you know, in the world. So it was, yeah, I mean, the idea of art wasn't predominant. That wasn't the focus. And I think that may have come a little later in the game, as we, you know, we refined or honed our signature and writing and the way we presented, you know, what we referred to as masterpieces, which is like using more than one color or outlining your letters that represented your name. But it was, you know, it was not arts and crafts, you know. It was more an adventure for us, you know.
And you got your names from your address or buildings, or?
Get your names from, I mean, a nickname, which was, you know, sometimes you had been known since you were a kid. Sometimes we would adapt names like from comic books and just words that you liked, or something that was, you know, a character from a movie or something you related to or that described you best. And numbers, for the most part, numbers in New York City graph culture were the number of your street, the number of your building, or the number of how, you know, if you were bomb one. In my case, I was bomb one, the first bomb, as opposed to bomb 159. I think there was another guy from bomb 159. And so there was generally some sort of actual significance to the number you were using. You know, Mike 171, SJK 171, those guys were from 171st Street. So the numbers had absolute meaning. Taki 183 is from 183rd Street. Taki is a nickname for the Greek Demetrius. So that's, you know, it was an actual, his family called him Taki. So these are, you know, actual, that it's not just a word that you pull out of the, you know, the air for no reason, random. And I'm speaking specifically about my generation of writers. And that's, you know, because I'm not sure that, I mean, and nowadays you see words that are just almost like made up, that I can't, in some cases, are misspelt on purpose or whatever, or phonetically spelt. And I'm not actively a member of the current graffiti culture, so I don't know where those guys are picking them or how they go about picking names. But you know, traditionally from the beginning, that's how we came to our tags. What would later be called tags, because we were inventing the language. We were creating the language of graffiti, and so tag came in a little bit later. It wasn't in the first couple of years. Nobody was saying the word tag. You know?
Yeah. And Gatsby, how did you get your name?
So I loved F. Scott Fitzgerald's books, right? I loved how he took the ugliest parts of humanity and these really, you know, dark stories and made them so devastatingly beautiful. You know, because it's easy to make something that's already pretty beautiful. You know, to me, that's not necessarily art, right? Like, how do you take the things that are the ugliest parts of our society or the ugliest parts of our humanity and make them beautiful? And that's how I picked the name.
And then Risk, how about you? How'd you get your name?
My name came, I wrote Surf. My first graffiti name was Surf. I used to surf a lot. And I was at school and I was drawing on my desk, drawing waves or something. And some kid came from New York and he was like, had all these photos of subways. And he goes, "What do you write?" And I'm like, "I don't write, I draw pictures," because I didn't know the subculture of graffiti writing. I didn't know all that shit yet. So I was like, "What's wrong with you, motherfucker? I draw pictures, I don't write." And we did this the whole class. And he finally told me like, "Oh, I guess my tag is Surf." And I went and stole spray paint that night and I did a surf piece and that was my tag. And I think I was like one of like 5 kids that surfed in that school. Because it was a busing school. I went to a school I did bust into in the city, and then so I got caught really easy, super quick, and I had to change it to Risk. And my friend wrote Chance, and I thought that was the coolest name ever. Now I think it's a terrible name, but I was sitting in this room one day and I looked up and I saw the board game that said Risk, and I was like, "Oh, Chance, Risk, that's cool."
Right.
I took it, but then back then I wrote Risky or Risk Rock or Is Rock or Risk. I changed it around so many different ways. And it just always came back to Risk, and then Risk stuck, and I'm thankful because I love that name now. But when I first had it, I didn't think it was a good name.
That's a great story.
That is a good story.
And Al, you've worked a little bit with Dave Navarro. We had Dave in our Rave Miami show. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got that collaboration?
I just happened to have a shirt that he made the shirts, but the image on the shirt is a milk container, and it's things that are missing in society today. I wish I could show it. I can stand up. So here's a milk container. Can you see that? Anyway, and it says, so he asked me to actually, that's part 2. Let's get to how I met Dave Navarro. Was he had seen Jim Jarmusch's wife, Sarah Driver, made a film, a very impactful film about the life and times surrounding teenage Basquiat. And me and a bunch of other downtown people were involved, doing interviews and telling the story of what New York was like and what working with Basquiat was like, et cetera, et cetera. So Dave had seen the premiere when it went to LA, and was somehow he could relate to me, and for whatever reason, and reached out to me in a DM, in a Instagram DM message. And lo and behold, I find this message, and I'm like, so is this Dave Navarro? Dave Navarro? Like, and sure enough, it was him. And he had he requested, like, he'd be coming into New York, so maybe we could meet and talk about a commission, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, I was more than psyched to do that. So as a result, we ended up doing a couple of we hit it off pretty well. Dave was a very a genuine person. He was accessible. He was for a big star, but he was a regular guy that you could talk to, and we shared a lot of similar experiences. And we ended up doing this collaboration with the milk. The first thing he asked was, we did more than one collaboration, but the first was he wanted to do a milk container, like the children missing milk container theme, but it was things that are missing in society. And he had asked a few different artists to fill in his milk container. He gave a print, an empty print of a milk container that he had screened or somehow generated this image. And everyone in their own style filled the milk container with things that were missing, like words, expressing what's missing in society today. And I using my subway letters, I wrote, it's tolerance, understanding, dedication, sincerity, and patience. And we kind of got a little bit of a hit with it. We did some prints, some really beautiful prints, and we paste posters and a lot of stickers. Dave had a nice, really beautiful die cut stickers made. So they became really kind of a hit for us, and right off the bat. And then we ended up doing another collaboration later with his needle and skull and crossbones with the needle and the spoon. Where I think it was, I forgot what my message was, but it was quite beautiful as well. It was a screen print that we did.
That's great.
And we've maintained a working relationship. A good acquaintance since then.
And Risk, you worked with Dave too. How did that collaboration happen?
Dave and I had a lot of mutual friends for years throughout Hollywood, stuff like that. And then he had some of the guys in my crew come down and paint his garage, and we talked briefly here and there. And then actually, he was a collector, and I think he got one of my pieces. And I went to his house. I saw what Al did in his house, and I saw the amazing collection he had in his house. I wanted to do something. I pinned the back of his house actually, and then since then we've just done a ton of stuff together. We're working on a ton of stuff now, and he's just a great dude. He's super fucking knowledgeable about art, which just blew me away because you're like, oh, this is Dave Navarro. What do you know about art? And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So it's just a good dude.
Yeah,
he is. And Adam, you DM'd him too and got him to be on our first program. So it's the same way, right? Just Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. I DM'd him. I thought he might enjoy one of my fake news Bibles. I gold foil Bibles with fake news instead of like Holy Scriptures. And he did. I sent him one of those, and then we kind of hit it off, same as they were saying, just a really genuine, cool guy. And then invited him to be on the panel with us for Art Basel. And then we did that one, the Tom and Jerry addiction piece together with him and Padia.
Right. That's right.
Great.
So Risk, you have some cool new Buddha pieces for today's show. Tell us about them for a little bit here.
So those pieces came about when Shep Gordon commissioned me to do a piece for him, and he's a Buddhist. So I had to look into that and kind of figure a little bit about Buddhism. And I liked a lot of aspects of it, and I changed around. You know, like I made Alice Cooper eyes because he managed Alice Cooper, and then I did like chickens instead of doves because Alice Cooper. It's all this references, rock references. And then I met Ed Moses, and it was like he's like a hero of mine. You know, Ed Moses was the almighty because the Ferris Gallery and that whole movement. That's my whole thing, trying to continue dialogue with those guys. And I started working on some projects with Ed, and he's a Buddhist. And then he just got me in tune with a lot of stuff. He's like, embrace the shit that you're scared of, and just, you know, all these things. So I started doing it. I started doing these Buddhists, you know, and I think I did one for Ed, and I think he passed away when I was working on it. And I just kind of was like, I went to the funeral, and it was a beautiful Buddhist funeral, and just got caught up in it, man. It's just like, it's those pieces that I do, and I'm not a Buddhist, you know, not practicing. I like a lot of aspects of it, but it's just something that gets me in a real tranquil feeling. Sometimes I get a little inside my head's a little crazy sometimes, so I need to get in the studio and do these Buddhist pieces, and kind of that's what I do. So I went through some crazy stuff recently personally, and I had to get in the studio, and I worked on the Buddha series, and it pulled me through it, and that's where they came from.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a good story. And just like we always talk about, I mean, the stories are what sells the art, right? I mean, you know, that's what's going to sell the Buddhist pieces for you. I mean, that's a really good story.
Exactly.
And Gatsby, you're standing next to a couple big pieces. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so these are some of kind of my takes on Roy Lichtenstein's Sad Girls. This one over here is I Know How It Feels at Moments Just Like These, right? Because I think that's something that's part of the human experience that we all share, right? We all share tragedy, you know, we all share sadness over things that happen in our lives. And that's one of the gifts that art's given me, is whenever something happens that, you know, I view as a negative or that hurts me now, I think to myself, like, all right, thank you for the tragedy. I needed that for my art.
Very good. And Al, we're going to talk about your art in a little bit later in our program. And I know that you're at a show right now in New York.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time out. We're going to let you go, and then I'm going to show your work in a little bit and talk to the viewers about it on your behalf.
Oh, thank you so much for your consideration. I mean, that's really thoughtful of you. It's been a pleasure. I mean, we could talk for hours, but
I know.
anytime you want to have me back, we'll talk about any number of subjects.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I want to say hello to Risk and to Gatsby, and yeah, hope to see you guys soon.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the Shanghai thing with Beyond the Streets, and let's see what happens with that. But I appreciate you involving me with this. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, Al. Thanks. All right,
Thanks.
Gatsby.
Good luck at the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.